Good morning. I'm Jim Quinn, and I'm a member of the National Summer Learning Association Board, and I bring you warm greetings from the City of Baltimore on behalf of our entire NSLA Board of Directors. I joined the board of NSLA just a few years ago after retiring as president of Tiffany & Company, which was, as you might expect, a wonderful career. I was there for 25 years, the last 10 as president of the company. And it gave me a wonderful journey where I gained many, many insights. In particular, the value of education and how it provides access and opportunity for everybody to gain social and economic mobility. And summer learning, as all of you know, and I discovered only a few years ago, addresses the need to bring access and opportunity to those who are most in need. Talent and drive and ambition, I think those can be said to be equitably distributed across gender and geography and wealth, ethnicity. Opportunity is not so equitably distributed. And summer learning is a proven means to provide critical tools to those most in need, to close the achievement gap, and to create future leaders, perhaps not unlike Dr. Freeman Hrabowski. Dr. Hrabowski is the president of the University of Maryland, Baltimore County since 1992. He's a consultant on science and math education to national agencies, universities, and school systems. He was recently named by President Obama to chair the newly created President's Advisory Commission on Educational Excellence for African Americans. He also chaired the National Academies Committee that produced the recent report, Expanding Underrepresented Minority Participation, America's Science and Technology Talent at the Crossroads. He's been named one of the 100 most influential people in the world by Time magazine, and one of America's best leaders by U.S. News and World Report. He also received TIAA-CREF's Theodore Hesburgh Award for Leadership Excellence, the Carnegie Corporation's Academic Leadership Award, and the Heinz Award for contributions to improving the human condition. UMBC has been recognized as a model for academic innovation and inclusive excellence by such publications as U.S. News, which for the past 6 years ranked UMBC as the #1 up-and-coming university in the nation. With philanthropist Robert Meyerhoff, he co-founded the Meyerhoff Scholars Program in 1988. The program is open to all high-achieving students committed to pursuing advanced degrees and research careers in science and engineering and advancing underrepresented minorities in those fields. The program is recognized as a national model. Dr. Hrabowski has authored numerous articles, co-authored books, Beating the Odds and Overcoming the Odds, focusing on parenting and high-achieving African-American males and females in science. His most recent work, Holding Fast to Dreams, Empowering Youth for the Civil Rights Crusade to STEM Achievement, describes the events and experiences that played a central role in his development as an educator and as a leader. He and UMBC have been featured on CBS's 60 Minutes, attracting national attention for the university's achievements involving innovation and inclusive excellence. A child leader in the civil rights movement, Dr. Hrabowski was prominently featured in Spike Lee's 1997 documentary, Four Little Girls, on the racially motivated bombing in 1963 of Birmingham's 16th Street Baptist Church. It's truly a great honor for me to welcome to the stage our esteemed guest, Freeman Hrabowski.
Very much, Jim. I am delighted. Thank you so much. I should tell everybody in the audience, the longer the introduction, the older the person is. It's very depressing, Jim. You went on and on and on. You really did. I see, two of my alums are sitting here at this table with me. Monica was an incredible basketball player who's now a fabulous educator. Would you stand, Monica? I'm really proud of her. I'm really proud of her. I'm so proud of her. I just am. I am so proud. And then Derek is an assistant principal. Derek, stand up. It's so important to have young black men. I am just, it just does me. It's so important to see young people thinking about focusing on education. I begin with poetry, as I often do. It was William Carlos Williams that said, "It's difficult to find news in poetry, and yet men die miserably every day because of a lack of what's found there," men and women, I would say. It was our beloved and now late Maya Angelou who looked into the face of this nation before my students at UMBC were born, at the installation of another president, and said, "Lift up your eyes upon this day, breaking for you. Give birth again to the dream. Women, children, men, take it, this dream, into the palms of your hands. Mold it into the image of your most public self. Sculpt it into the shape of your most private need. Here on the pulse of this new day, you may have the grace to look up and out and into your sister's eyes and into your brother's face and say simply, very simply with hope, good morning." Good morning, y'all. Good morning. Give her a round of applause for that poetry. Poetry. And I added that y'all on because I am from the Deep South. I like to say that Baltimore, where we raised our son and where we've been for years, is the Upper South. One day we think like people in Philadelphia, the next day we think like people in Richmond. It depends on the issue, and it's been that way since the Civil War. In contrast, when you're from Birmingham, you know you're from the real South, the Deep South. Oh yeah, you're very proud of that. Yeah, and I'm going to be down at the University of one of my mentees and graduates of UMBC is President of Clemson, and he's sending for me. And I'll be down there this afternoon in South Carolina. And here's the point I would make. The way we think about ourselves as a nation, as individuals, the language that we use, the way we interact with each other, the values that we hold will shape not only who we are today, but who we will be in the future, who our children and their children will be. And so it will be our dreams and our values that determine who we become. I grew up, as I said, in the Deep South, and in the Deep South we love stories. If I stood here and gave you several theories, you'd go to sleep. But if I give you a story, you may listen to it. Now, let me ask you a question. The president of Stanford asked college presidents about a year ago, how long do you think college students listen to a lecture before they fade out? How long would you say? I heard 10 minutes, 25 minutes. Somebody just got it. It really is 8 minutes. 8 minutes. The fact is, the neuroscientists will tell us that and I've talked with a number of neuroscientists about that human beings, we say, can focus for about 20 minutes. Really focus, because after that, you're thinking about what you have to do for the rest of the day or the challenges you had yesterday. And you all are very successful 20th century learners. So you know how to look at me like you're really interested in what I'm saying. See, our students have a way of looking like, what are you talking about? But you all have this look like, I'm listening, when I know you're thinking about something else, right? Now, why do I tell you that? Because today I'm going to, even though I'm giving this keynote, I'm going to have a conversation with you by asking you questions along the way. Because what we've learned at UMBC, a campus that has students from 150 countries, is that regardless of where the student is from, regardless of how disciplined and focused the student is, it helps in the teaching and learning process if we disrupt things. If we don't just have the typical lecture with somebody sitting there having to take notes. Because if you go around at high school level, at the college level, and you look into a classroom, if that person is just up there just talking, you will see the faces of the people, of the students, doing all kinds of things. You can just feel it, that if they're not texting, they're doing something with social media, they're writing, but they're saying, God, I'll be glad when this is over. All right? So here I go with the first story. My mother grew up in a little country town. I grew up in the big city in Birmingham. She grew up in a small town in Wetumpka outside of Montgomery. And as a child, growing up in the 30s, she had to work in a cotton field. She had a choice of either working in a cotton field or she had the privilege, she thought, to go and work in a wealthy home, wealthy white home. And she wanted to see how rich white people lived. And this is as a little girl. And she worked in that home, cleaning, of course. And interestingly enough, the woman was kind enough to say, Maggie, when you finish your work, you can go into the library and read. This was before television. And mother would be very inquisitive and go and look at the books. And the woman gave her a book and said, well, you take the book home, bring it back, and as you're reading it, we'll talk about it. And they did just that. Now, in contrast, she would be at home in the evenings, or even on the weekends. And interestingly enough, her girlfriends would say, Maggie, come on outside and play. And my mom would say, no, I want to stay here and read this book. And they would say, why would you want to keep your head in that book when you can come out and play? And she was a good basketball player too. My mom was, all right? And interestingly enough, she said she loved the fun. She loved having fun. But she said the more she read, and here's the first one I'm making, the more she read, the better a reader she became. And the more proficient a reader she became, the more she enjoyed the experience. And the more she enjoyed reading, the more she could use it to allow her to dream about the possibilities. And to forget that she was this poor little girl of color in the midst of poverty, and to think about what she might become, who she might be. And what she found was that the more she read, the stronger her language skills became. The more she enjoyed writing, the more she enjoyed speaking in standard English. And all of a sudden, people in church and other places would say, that's a special little girl. Let's get Maggie to do it. And so she became a real supporter of developing her language skills and of reading about places she had never heard of before. And because of those experiences, she graduated, did really well, finishing high school, went on to college, worked really cleaning tables in the dorm, in the little dining hall there at the college there in Alabama, and she became an English teacher because she saw how the immersion into language had transformed not only her vision of herself, but her sense of self and her future. And she said, if I can help more children to develop their ability to think, because that's what she saw, their ability to think, and therefore to speak and to write in clear and simple standard English, I will help to change the world. And one of my mother's favorite writers was Zora Neale Hurston, who wrote the book, Their Eyes Were Watching God. And, you know, you get goosebumps with this stuff. And I remember as a child, my mama going around the house while she was making my cousin and me clean, and she'd be quoting Hurston and others. And we'd say, Mom, why are you doing that, right? You know how your parents do things to you when you're a kid and you hate it. Years later, you really appreciate that they did it. And I didn't realize that just her reciting the language from that book and poetry from Emily Dickinson to Eudora Welty, to so many people, that you're developing your ability to appreciate language in the same way you do when you understand music, when you take the arts, when you get a chance to appreciate music. And the book begins, ships at a distance, have every man's wish on board. For some, they come in with the tide. For others, they sail forever on the horizon, never out of sight, never landing, until the watcher turns his head away in resignation, his dreams mocked to death by time. That is the life of men, and my mother would say, and women. And the point that Hurston was making, and the point that my mother and my father were drilling into my cousin and me all the time was there are these two groups of people in our society. People whose dreams become reality. And then there are people whose dreams are, in the words of Langston Hughes, forever deferred. And they would always say the difference between the two groups so often is education. That the better educated the child, the better educated that family, the more opportunities they will have. And the question I ask you is this: where would anyone in the room be if you had not learned to read well, to think critically, to aspire to something beyond yourself, to dream about the possibilities, to get the education that allowed you to get the job? And you're here today because you've done so well that you can be supportive not only of your own children, but of other people's children. It's a powerful message when we as a country begin to understand that. Interestingly enough, so I grew up in Birmingham in this wonderful home where my mama would punish me using characters from books. If you can get to that. So it was probably Bigger in Native Son, when Bigger gets into trouble. And when I was about to get into trouble, she'd go, okay, Bigger, okay. And then when I got really arrogant, she'd call me Raskolnikov, from Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. But she had been pushing us to read these books as children, struggling to read them. And here was the problem. My friends would say, who the is Raskolnikov? And I would be so embarrassed because I knew. Because we had been talking about these things in my home, but I wouldn't tell them I knew. I said, I don't know what she's talking about, right? But again, my God, how blessed to have been pushed to think about human behavior in another culture while I'm in little colored Birmingham. And this is the point that I'm making, that somehow, as you think about where you were as a child and how you developed your skills, there were people, whether it was your mother, your father, a grandmother, a teacher, somebody who got you into that habit of doing something. If we could get kids into the habit of reading and liking to read and enjoying reading and reading better, they'd be on their way. They'd be on their way. And the challenge, the reason that what you do with your challenge, as we talk about America's challenge, is that even when we get them into those habits, if they're not in an environment when they leave that school at the end of the year, and there is no book, and there are no people supporting them in the reading and thinking and writing and getting on to the math and other things, they come back in the fall, and they've fallen back. They've fallen back. Now, you all get that. That's why you're here today. I'm going to say to you what I say to the scientists at the National Institutes of Health, what I say to the people at the National Security Agency, to the people at the Department of Energy, that because you are experts in this work, because you really do understand, from Jim to all of your colleagues here, that children need more support and academic work in that period between May or June and August and September, if we are to keep moving ahead for every child and for our country. Because you're the ones who get it, who live it, experience it, you become the leaders and the ambassadors. That when I talk with scientists, I am often saying to them, if you can't explain it in clear language, that somebody who doesn't know science understands it, how do you expect them to want to vote for extra money for basic research? If they only think that this is for a few people on the side, that it's not for everybody, how can we ever get to the point of having a movement in which people of all races, from all kinds of backgrounds say, yeah, we get it, this is important, and we must convince those elected to represent us in saying this is important for the country. I would posit today that in our country, we must get to the point of helping every child to have substantive academic experiences throughout the year. Throughout the year. Give me a round of applause for that idea. I was just saying, when you talk about athletics on our campuses, you can believe that, and somebody was talking about professional teams, you can believe that every college and university in this country knows exactly how many days that that team can practice for the NCAA. And they would be devastated if somebody said that other teams in other parts of the country got more days for the practice than they did. You get my point? So we get it in athletics. Why we wouldn't get that the mind is the most terrible thing to waste is a challenge for all of us. And so growing up there in Birmingham, getting a chance to be talking about books and everything all the time, I had this sense of the ability to think well. And so when Dr. King was standing at a lectern in my church, when I didn't want to be there, and this gets to part of what I write about in this book, and he says to the congregation, to all these people, if the children participate in this peaceful demonstration, all of America will understand that it's just not right not to give our children equal resources. And I thought about it, and I looked at him, and I said, who is this guy? Because I didn't want to be there anyway. This is the middle of the week. What kid wants to be in church in the middle of the week, right? And my parents had placated me with the two things that I love most, math and food. I was getting fatter and smarter all the time. And and you know, those Southerners love those cheeks, you know, so they were very mad. And amazingly, I'm eating my M&Ms, the good kind with the peanuts, and I'm doing my math, and all of a sudden I hear this man say this, and I said, who is that guy? And it was, of course, Dr. King. And I go home and I said, well, I want to participate. And they said, no, you can't, because these children are going to be put in jail. Just for peacefully marching along saying, we want a better education. Because we were tired, I was tired of these hand-me-down books from white schools, these torn-up books. And when, you know, when your parents say, well, we'll buy his books, and they said, no, you can't, because then he'd be different from other children. So you are doomed to sit in a classroom with these torn-up books where white kids have been writing in them for years, and then they're supposed to come to us. Imagine the psychological impact of that. And so, yeah, I wanted to go, and I did go, and it was a challenging experience. But what I learned, because I spent a week in jail as a 12-year-old, and what I learned, though, was this, that even children can be empowered to envision the possibilities. That, as Thoreau talks about civil disobedience, children can be taught to think about ways in which the world is not right in what it's doing. And that there are things you can do to change the way things are. And that the more education I received, the more I could think critically, the better the chance I would be okay in life. If we can get our families and children understanding the empowering effect of education, we'll get more passion for education as we have more passion for athletics. You know, I said something about this in Texas. I was in Texas. You know, I've never met a Texan who didn't love Texas. I love that about Texas. I really do. I mean, you think about it. You meet a Texan, your cousin from Texas, they're going to tell you they love Dallas and Houston, wherever it is, Lubbock, right? And so I made the statement to a big school board association. I said, you know, they were having a problem with Algebra 1. I said, if your state, I said, great state in many ways. I said, if your state could put as much attention on algebra as you do on football, every child would be doing calculus. And half the audience really applauded. Half of them applauded. Y'all better applaud me. Wait a minute on that idea. Wait a minute. And the other half was truly upset with me because I had just insulted God, or next to God. I had said something about football. And so I'm signing books afterwards, and this principal comes up to me, David, and he says, how could you insult football like that? I said, wait a minute, I did not insult football. I just said I want you to be as excited about math as you are about football, right? To get it. He said, you know you played football in high school. I said, no, I was doing math. And he was really bothered by me because real boys play football. What is my point? That the language again, the values we have, whether we think about these issues or not. I mean, how many of you are from a community where you see children in the paper more likely because they've done well in English or math than they've done well in basketball and football? What is it that we celebrate for our children? What are the messages that we send? And so a part of our challenge in our country is to rethink how we talk about what's important to us. And that athletics are clearly important in the lives of children and all of our lives. I'm not suggesting that. I'm simply suggesting there are other things that are just as, and quite frankly, more important. More important if you really think about it. Give me a hand for that. Come on. Because if you don't believe it, nobody will believe it. Very important. The key is within a matter of my going to jail and all the experiences and others going to jail and the challenges in the civil rights movement, we had dramatic changes in our country. And I'm telling you this story because it can inspire us to think about what we need to do with public policy, to think about the country rethinking how many days children in school, what we do in the summertime, how we make sure kids have certain experiences. Now, there are two things I want you to think about. What percent of Americans do you think had a college degree in the early 60s when I went to jail with Dr. King? What do you think? What percent? I heard 20. Somebody else? 30. Now, don't be risk-averse on me now. Come on, guess. 6. I heard from 20 and 30. 5. Anybody in the back? Come on in the back. Right, 65% is very good. It was only 10%. Only 10% of Americans had a college degree. And at that time, we were not breaking it down by different ethnic groups. Everything was black and white in the 60s. Now, the first thing that shocked me when I wrote a piece on this and sent it over with my job with this Obama commission, I sent it to the White House, and they didn't know why I asked this question. I said, well, what percent of Americans were even in the world had been born by 1963? Watch this. How many of you were born after 1963? That's disgusting. That is disgusting, Jeff. Me and you, right? Me and you, right? We know what they don't know, all right? That is just disgusting, all right? I want all you just to get out of here. Just leave, right? But you get my point. You see this room, right? Well, it turns out in America, 2/3 of Americans in the world today had not even been born. And so you don't know the world as those of us who are younger, who are older know the world. And this is what I mean. You're accustomed to people talking about going to college, getting some kind of post-secondary degree. Well, if you imagine that only 10% of Americans had a college degree, most families weren't saying, I want my child to go to college. It wasn't even a possibility. And now break it down. Everything was black and white. By the way, let me just show you how much things were black and white. At that time, TV was black and white. How many of you grew up in a house with a color television? That's also disgusting. I want you to know that, right? My students are always saying, Doc, TV has always been in color. No, it really was black and white, all right? And then let me just ask, how many of you grew up in homes where there was a computer? That's also fairly disgusting, all right? One of the principals in another state asked me, he said, Doc, you didn't go back far enough, though. He said, when I grew up, the house got its first refrigerator. And everybody on the street came to just sit there and watch it make ice. So it's all about when you grow up. Technology tells us a lot, but it tells you how different the world is. That's the point I'm making, depending on where you are, all right? Now, why is that important? Think about this just for a minute. What percent of whites do you think had a college degree? If 10% of Americans, what percent of whites had a college degree? Let me hear. Did I hear 80? 8. Now, remember now, you know, if the average is 10 now, I know y'all like some math, okay? If the average is 10, you can believe whites are not at the bottom, all right? Percentage-wise, you get my point? If the average is 10, you can believe white folks had a higher percentage. You get my point? You see what I mean? They were just more advantaged, all right? Come on, what percentage? 12, 65, it was actually only 11%. 11% of white, what percent of blacks? About 3%, all right? Mainly who had gone to the HBCUs in the South, all right? Now, today, what percent of Americans have a college degree? 35, 45, 85, it's actually, we just got to 30% of Americans with a college degree, okay? All right, now, one other question. What percent of whites? We got to 37, 38% last year. What percent of blacks? It's about 19%. What's the fastest growing group in our country? Hispanics. What percent of Hispanics? It's just at 15%. You put it all together, this is what I can tell you. So more than 2/3 of Americans over 25 do not have college degrees today. Okay? So, now, this is the point. All of my friends of every race will say, Freeman, that couldn't be true. Everybody I know has a college degree. Duh. Duh. I mean, teachers are around teachers, doctors are around doctors, lawyers around lawyers, business people around business people. So you're around people, and plumbers who make more money than any of y'all are around plumbers. Give the plumbers a round of applause. I will tell you this. The fact is that I just looked at the data. Almost 90% of Americans say they want their kid to get some kind of post-secondary education. I will argue that college is great for a lot of people. College is not the best thing for every child when he finishes high school. Give me a hand for that. It is not. There are all kinds of what we call, Jobs for the Future talks about it, post-secondary opportunities, right? And for a lot of young people, it makes more sense. I was at a school, and it was an upper middle-class Catholic little school up in one of the counties here, and the kid got up, a little middle-class white kid, and he said, Doc, I want you to be truthful with me if I ask you this question. This is in front of all the school, and parents were there, and he said, I don't want to go to college. He said, I'm an AB student, but I'm bored. No offense, teachers, he said, but I'm bored sitting in a classroom. I want to work on construction. He says, what do I do? And so I talked about a compromise, and everybody's looking to see what I'm right. The teachers wanted me to say, go to college, boy, right? Parents said, don't you dare say he can't go. But I had to be authentic with this child. Because what does it mean to go and you're sitting there not wanting to be there? You're not learning anything. You're just going through the motion. And you have time to do all those things. What did I say? I said, you want to have the right skills in the reading and the math and all that. But also I said, you can go to a community college and get a degree in construction management while working. And then later on, go on and get a bachelor's degree in business or something, but you can get the hands-on experience because a lot of people want hands-on experiences while they are doing whatever they're doing. Now, how many of you between the ages, how many of you are over 35 years old? Oh, you look good. You know, I got good news and bad. I got good news and bad. Which one you want first? Bad news is you're getting old. I hate to tell you that, all right? But I'm just kidding. But the good news is that you really do look good. But now, if you're over 35, you are second, and you're an American. You are second in the world in the level of education. The best educated, second in the world. Anybody between 25 and 34. Look how proud they are. Oh, look at them. They say, oh, yeah, we're not old like y'all, right? I got good news and bad. Which one you want first? Bad news, you're not as smart as we are. Just kidding. The fact is, you are not. If the other group is number 2, that group is number 12, 11 to 12 in the world. And it's not because fewer people are going to college. They get to college and they don't make it. And in other countries, they go and they are able to succeed. And it has everything to do with reading and math, that achievement gap that we talk about, and the challenges that we face. It really does, all right? But the good news for you, I need to give you some good news, right? The good news is we are jealous as hell because we wish we were your age. Give the young people a round of applause, would you please, the 25 to 34. So you heard me talk about reading and completion. Now math. How many of you love math? It's a pretty nerdy group, not bad. This is very unusual, about 35%. That's very unusual in America because usually somebody will ask me, how can you put love and math in the same sentence, right? And the first thing I always say in my books, and other experts would agree, is that mothers, you must stop telling your girls, your daughters, that you are not good in math. Give me a round of applause for that. Very important. Very important. You know, and what you can always say is, well, I want to learn some more. Maybe I didn't have the best teacher. The teacher and I didn't connect a certain way. Because the fact is, I said this to 1,000 math teachers this summer, and I've been teaching math 40 years. We math teachers have a way of looking at students. And if you look at me, Jim, like you don't like that math, my message to you is I'll help you this year, but don't come back next year, all right? You get that feeling that, how many of you in this room knew that you were either a math science type or you were a history, English, arts type by the time you were in the 11th grade? Raise your hands and look around the room. It's an American challenge. And then if we had the time, I would have you go through, how did you know? You'll give me reasons like, well, I was just better in this, or I was a good writer, or I didn't understand the math, or my teacher gave me the message, right? all these, we send those messages all the time to children that you're either one or the other. Now, here's the other part. I work with other countries on the STEM stuff, on the math and science stuff. And so I can be in Germany working with children in the apprenticeship programs in chemistry. And the testing that we've done for years will show that the kids who are not going to the university, who are not slated to go to the university, who are not the highest achievers in that country, when I'm in Stuttgart, in Baden-Württemberg, are literally, when they take their test in chemistry, having worked in the classroom and in a company with their teacher in chemistry, that they do better on the chemistry exam than our students who get 5s on AP chemistry. Why? You learn to do by doing. Whether it is the reading, the math, whatever it is. Let me tell you, the best math I've seen in pre-calculus and geometry and things was done in green construction in Los Angeles at a community college with GED students who were building a house. And I watched them using the Pythagorean theorem and understanding angles and understanding the area and talking about the problems and figuring it out and experimenting and learning through seeing and using their hands. And by the time they took the math test, they didn't even realize it was math. It was just life. And so a part of the challenge that we face is that we need to do two things. We've got to rethink how we connect the teaching and learning to life itself. Number two, we have to keep students understanding they can do anything if they're willing to try. All right. Number three, we have to have that passion for the learning ourselves. Number four, we have to change our attitudes about what we mean when we say something about somebody smart. We have this way of talking about, oh, he's smart and she's smart. Well, you know, I get a lot of kids who come to my campus, kids from all over the world, and they'll have perfect test scores, perfect math scores. So they think of themselves as, I'm the smartest in the world. That's the mindset. You can feel it. You can feel it with the freshmen, like I'm ready, right? And then I'll show them little kids who've been in the Center for Talented Youth who are finishing the calculus sequence before they're 13. Okay? A lot of little homeschool kids. Children can learn more than we think they can. They can think more critically. If we treat a child like a thinker, the child will be a thinker. Give me a hand for that idea. The child will be a thinker. And I can tell you that we have, on the one hand, these kids and these early scholars who are going through the math really fast, and we've got them there because I really want to teach these children to have emotional intelligence, because it's a bad situation when you're a genius and you're an asshole. You know that? Give me a hand for that idea. Is that real? Is that real when you think you all that? Because you think you all that. Nobody wants to be around. And that's why, as Malcolm Gladwell says in his book, geniuses don't do any better than anybody else, because they don't know how to deal with people. That just as I want to teach the reading and the math, and I want them to have some sense of the arts and to appreciate all those things, I want them to learn how to connect to people, how to understand the instructions, when they go to work, how to get there on time and how to respect the authority. I mean, these are all the values that any child has to have. So we work with these young scholars on that side. Now, we're right there at the airport. Come by my campus. It's a really great, it looks like the Plaza of Nations at the UN. All these kids, international and domestic diversity. But we also lead the country as a predominantly white school in sending black kids on to get MD, PhDs. Give me a big hand for that. Big deal. But on the other end of the continuum, and equally talented, if not more in many ways, are all of our children who are in our choice program for first-time offenders. These are little boys mainly, some girls now, more and more girls in gangs. But these are children who have committed a crime, a nonviolent crime, and they have a choice with the judge of either being the grandmama, mama, or being in this choice program, we've had it 25 years, or going to jail. So we supervise these children 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. 12 months, I mean, through the summer. And the whole, give my campus a hand for doing it, first of all. I'm very proud. Because the first thing that would happen when I was proposing it back in the late 80s, the first thing I heard from people was this. You're going to bring those thugs to campus? Not thugs. They said, you're going to bring those criminals to campus. I said, they're children. They're children. If you treat a child with respect and love, you can get, and structure, all things are possible. And what is amazing is this. These children are with us in the evening, on the weekends, in the summers. We make sure they go home and stay at home. And literally 24 hours a day, we are giving support to these kids. Amazingly what they can learn to do, because you learn to do by doing, the reading and the math. When they come to UMBC, not necessarily, but we can get them into a post-secondary program, sometimes a small college, sometimes a community college. We've got some in the jobs. And the point I would make about the math and the reading on both sides is this: that somehow in our programs, in our strategies, we must teach people that we can have rigor even as we have creative activities that will involve play. There are ways of connecting the two. There are ways of using their culture, the ways of using their language. And if they want to do it in a poem, if they want to do it in a rap, and they can learn more about language, we need to find ways of bringing out the best in them and letting them know what's possible. But this is my final point before questions. It all depends on the relationships we have with those children. And I leave you with a story from my mama. At the end of her life, she had been teaching for 40 years, and we brought her here to Baltimore. And she said, and she had been smart enough to hide the fact she had developed dementia. She was very clever about it. And yet, she didn't know who I was, and I was an only child. And I'll never forget her looking at me one morning and saying, "I know the end is near." And you don't want to hear your mama say that. And I said, "Well, what's important to you? What's important to you?" I'm trying to hold it together. And she said, "What's important?" She said, "Relationships." She said, "My relationship with my God," hold on to your faith. She could tell I was really having a hard time. She said, "My relationship with my husband, he's a wonderful man." She'd forgotten Daddy had died 20 years before. Then she shocked me. I told you I'm an only child. She looked at me and she said, "You know I have a son." I said, "Oh my God, she's about to tell me she had a kid when she's a teenager. She gonna drop this bomb on me and die." And I'm thinking to myself, TMI. Too much information. If I had a brother, but I don't want a brother, all right? I don't want the drama with it, right? And then she said, "He's the college president." Thank God she was talking about me. She just didn't know I was right. And then she gave me the gift I give to you as I close. She said, "But I now understand that teachers touch eternity through their children, through their students." Whatever I had to give, my sense of right and wrong, my lust for learning, and my belief that those children could do it, I gave it to my babies, to those children, and I will always live through them. I went back and spoke in Birmingham, and all these retired teachers came up and said, "Your mama taught me not just to love to read, but to read a lot." And I went to college because she went to my grandmama's house in the projects and said, "Don't let that child drop out. Let her go on and get that education." They said she deserves to get, and because of your mama, I'm here today and I could get my younger brothers and sisters, and we got our grandmama out of the projects because that one teacher believed in me. I challenge you to watch your thoughts, they become your words. Watch your words, they become your actions. Watch your actions, they become your habits. Watch your character. Watch your character, because it is more than you know who you are. I tell my students, your character is who you are when you don't think anybody can see you. What will you do then when your mama's not there, right? So thoughts become words. Words become actions. Actions become habits. Habits become character. Watch your character, it becomes your destiny, dreams, and values. Thank you all very much.